So what is the best digital audio workstation in 2023? Well, the TLDR is there is no best DAW. The best DAW is really what works for you, what suits your workflow and your way of working. Any DAW can be used for any genre. However, some DAWs do have a reputation for specific genres, which I think is mostly due to their history. Before I start, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm an old school musician. I started writing music on Pro Tracker on the Commodore Amiga back in the early 1990s. Later I moved to the PC and I spent a few years working in Cakewalk, just at the time when VSTs were being introduced, and at that time Cakewalk support was limited, and at that time I wanted access to VSTs, instruments and effects, and I moved to Cubase. But I do still use trackers. It's a way to get back to my roots and have a bit of fun. But to help dispel some of the myths about some DAWs not being suitable for particular styles of music, I will just say now I'm still using Cubase, and I use it to produce mostly electronic music, which most people might think Ableton or another modern DAW might be better suited, but I'll go through my thoughts on this in a few moments. If you're interested in my electro projects, and this is real 1980s style electro, rather than whatever people are calling electro nowadays, you can check out my solo project Cohera, or my cooperation with another musician, which is titled Cybernet 1202. In addition to electro, I also love the British genre of hauntology, and I have one album currently available via Woodford Halse. The project is called Town and County, and the album A Plan for Plymouth. I also have another hauntology project, which should be released later this year, titled Pennycross Coven. So on to the DAWs. In my opinion, there's three main types, and I will say that I am generalising and talking from personal experience and probably making some assumptions here as well. I haven't used all of these. I've just read a lot about them, been involved in discussions and heard other people's thoughts. So firstly, we have the DAWs, which I would say are aimed at traditional musicians. By traditional musicians, I mean musicians that have some sort of formal training, some ability of playing an actual instrument, some understanding of theory, and possibly people that have many years' experience. These DAWs were really the first of their kind. So people of my generation started on the Atari ST with Pro 24, which evolved into Cubase. These have been around for a very long time, and there's a lot of people with a history in these products and a lot of knowledge built up around them. So traditional DAWs I regard Cubase, Cakewalk, Logic Pro, or Logic I think it's called generally now, Pro Tools, and I've said Cakewalk, but also people refer to it as BandLab as well. Now out of these, I will just say a couple of things. Again, this is based on perception and discussions online. Cubase, Logic, and Cakewalk or BandLab, I would say are all very similar in terms of functionality and capabilities. Pro Tools was always regarded as the professional DAW, but with being the professional, I understand it makes many things more complicated than they need to be, is very beginner unfriendly, and to be honest, most modern DAWs, it's my understanding, have surpassed it in many ways, but it's still hanging on in studios. I will also say that with Cakewalk or BandLab, there's this belief that because it's currently being offered for free, that it's of lower capability or lower value, but people don't realise this was a full-priced commercial package which equals Cubase. The fact it's free shouldn't really devalue it in any way. So don't think that Cakewalk or BandLab is just some beginner introduction DAW. It really isn't. It's a fully capable DAW in the same way that the others are that we're talking about here. The second category, and I think this may upset people here, so I'll try to be careful how I say this. There's the packages that are traditionally or have at least come from the electronic dance music scene, predominantly loop-based or started life as loop-based and still have signs of this loop-based production very much central in the design, or at least you can see how these things have evolved from these roots. In this category I would include GarageBand, Fruity Loops, or FL Studio as I think it's now called, Ableton and Bitwig Studio. Now obviously GarageBand and FL Studio I think are more aimed at newcomers. Ableton and Bitwig are more fully fledged production packages. But I have looked at Ableton, I have looked at Bitwig, and they still feel very much to me like they have a solid history in loops rather than traditional music production. And yes, I know they do MIDI, they do VSTs, they do everything else, of course they do. But there's a slightly different way of working, a slightly different workflow that may suit some people better than others. And I didn't find myself gelling very well with this type of workflow. But I have to say, if you want a multi-platform DAW, then Bitwig is currently available under Windows, OS X and Linux. The third category, which may surprise people, is trackers. I think these are very underrated and, to be honest, a secret that not many are aware of or at least take seriously. But options like Renoise or even the hardware Polyend tracker show just what's capable of this method of writing music. And for those that are not familiar, a tracker, rather than having notes on a piano roll scrolling left to right, you have the note data scrolling top to bottom or bottom to top on the screen. But you have the actual note written and some control codes that may refer to volume or pitch bend. And it can look a little bit confusing at first, but if you're not from perhaps a traditional music background, then to actually see the notes written as C, C sharp, D, scrolling in the timeline, it can make more sense, or it can be an easier way. Well, it can be an easier way to start writing music, especially with the timings. You can see how many notes per beat, and you can easily... It's a great visualization tool, but it's not just for beginners. You can create some amazing work in trackers. So if perhaps the traditional DAWs or the loop-based arrangers like Ableton and co don't gel well with you, if you want to try something different, then do check out Milky Tracker, Renoise. There's a whole range of trackers available for multi-platforms, and if you enjoy them, there is Polyend Tracker. Check out the YouTube videos to see just what it's capable of. And the fourth category isn't really a category. It's a DAW that I don't know a huge amount about, but I hear so many positive things about it. To me, it seems to take all the best parts from the traditional Cubase, Cakewalk, etc. DAWs with a modern interface, and as far as I'm aware, there's nothing lacking in this DAW, but it's very new. It's reasonably priced. It has some famous musicians supporting it, including Hans Zimmer, I believe, who's always been a traditional Cubase user. What is it? It's Reaper. I have yet to really investigate this myself, and to be honest, I have so much investment in Cubase, both in terms of years of experience and financial investment. To change DAW now feels like a mammoth task. And this is actually something that's worth saying. When I switched from Cakewalk to Cubase, back in the early 2000s maybe, that single change made me completely unproductive for at least 6 months. All my time was spent in Cubase just trying to learn how to do things that I could easily do under Cakewalk. And this really shouldn't be underestimated. You should be aware that when you commit to a DAW, your entire workflow will likely be dictated by that DAW. So it's also important to find a DAW that works with your workflow and meet somewhere happily in the middle. Switching DAWs once you've gained several years of experience can be very painful. So I don't want to scare anyone off, but I would recommend taking a little bit of time if you're new to electronic music production, just to explore the options there and find what works best for you. And as I said at the beginning, that's regardless of genre. If someone tells you that you need to use Ableton for trip hop or Bitwig for hip hop or, I don't know, Cubase for rock music, ignore it. This is just people. People will always recommend what they use, regardless of anything else. And many of these people don't actually have experience of anything else. They will just say, I write dance music, therefore this is the DAW for dance music, which is rubbish. So just to summarise, the best DAW is whatever works best for you. Don't lock yourself into what everyone else recommends, because these recommendations change over time anyway. I hope this has been useful, and if you like what I'm doing, please like and subscribe.